So PebblePad, for those who are not familiar with it, it's our institutional, centrally supported ePortfolio and learning journal platform. It has features that, when you combine it with good course design, can help your students integrate their learning. So it helps them make connections across courses, over time, between campus and community life, and it encourages them to make connections to different areas in their life and connect that with the classroom learning. PebblePad is accessed through Learn, so all instructors and all students have access to PebblePad. You don't have to put out a request to, use PebblePad in your course. It's already there, although there are some steps you'll have to make if you're going to be using assessment. Unlike Learn, students actually have access to their work in PebblePad after the course is over, and this is what makes it particularly useful to help students integrate learning from one context to another or make connections between courses. You could have them start an activity in one course and build on it in a subsequent course or in a subsequent year. And more than that, not only do they have access to their work after the course finishes, they also can use PebblePad after they graduate. So during our presentations today, we're going to see examples which will show how the presenters have used PebblePad to create multimedia content, provide prompts to students to help scaffold the learning. And we'll also hear how PebblePad supports formative and summative assessment, including peer review. So let's get started. I'm going to pass it over to Laura. So I'll just stop sharing my screen and then I'll mute my mic, and Laura, you can go ahead.
I'm just going to share my second screen here. Hope it all works. Can you see that, Catherine? Yes, I saw a thumbs up. Okay, so I start with a bit of an introduction about the course that I use PebblePad for, and then I'll talk a little bit about why I used it. This was the first time in the fall of 2020. So the course I used it for was a fourth-year course in kinesiology that focused on physical activity and aging. Students before this point have learned a lot about exercise prescription specifically, but perhaps a little bit less on implementation, behavior change, which is part of the focus on this course. So my overall goal is to develop knowledgeable professionals for fields related to physical activity and older adults, and to develop these implementation skills where they recognize, accommodate, adapt, and respond to the diverse needs of older adults. So it was really not about memorizing just changes amongst older adults and prescriptions associated. I really wanted them to be able to reflect on the individual and their circumstance or a group, critically think and make decisions that are appropriate to the specific context of a group of older adults. And so the delivery and the course evaluation are all structured with those outcomes in mind. So this was my evaluation. So 20% was geared towards the end of week activities, which included typically just a reflection on the course material, which included how it built on prior knowledge from other courses and how it might be used in application in their practice, whether that is going on to physiotherapy or medicine, which a lot of our students do, or straight into community practice. And then a lot of the course is centered around a somewhat scaffolded project where they start with a 3-minute program pitch that's meant to overcome barriers to physical activity amongst a certain group of older adults. And that includes people living in rural environments, people living with dementia, people, female care partners. I'm just thinking of some of the examples that students have done. And then these topics get ranked and people form groups around them, groups of 3 to 4 people, and they have a presentation and then a paper. And the final exam is also a case study. So figuring out, rather than a group of individuals, focusing in on an individual person and their barriers. Typically, in the in-person version, I have 10 to 15% that's allocated to participation, critical reflection in classes, how they contribute to the learning of others and demonstrate reflection on the content of that week. Unfortunately, I didn't see an easy way to do that anyways this term, but what I wanted to simulate was, ability to engage and reflect as they went through the material rather than just at the end or just at my 1 hour of class time. I wanted them to be able to reflect and answer and give opinions while they went through the material, which is how we'd normally do it in class. And so why did I use PebblePad is really related to this. Normally, they have a couple of readings beforehand, and then class time is focused on discussion and activities interspersed with, little mini lectures on the content that reinforce the readings. With the online class, and specifically with a larger class online, so typically I've had 48 students in this class. In the fall, they increased the cap to 72, so now I had more people in the online environment. And so it was difficult to replicate this engagement online. Although I did use breakout rooms during the in-person sessions for questions and case studies. So the reason I chose PebblePad is because you could put in reflections and questions really embedded in the content. I didn't have to direct them out to an assignment or to a discussion board. I could put those questions right intermixed with the content. And so how did I use PebblePad? I essentially used it to deliver all my course materials. My Learn site was really used to link out to PebblePad, to submit video presentations through Bongo, and that's essentially it. So I delivered all the content. I had content reflections integrated in the content, and then also used it to submit the end of week reflections or peer reviews. The latter were marked, the former were not. I also added an area where they could store major assignments. So the papers, which I should say I did submit through Dropbox on Learn, as well as the presentation, so that, as Catherine alluded to, they could have all the material from the course in one place. So if they wanted to refer back to it in the years to come, they could find all of that in one location. Now, I don't know how many people actually used it to upload their major assignments, but I wanted to give them that opportunity. So before going here, I'm just going to switch over to my PebblePad itself. Catherine, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Yes. Now. Okay, so this is my PebblePad workbook. And you can see that each week has a separate.
Sorry, Laura, can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yes, I should be able to zoom in.
Great, thank you.
There we go. So you can see that each week has a separate tab on top, and each of these were structured quite similarly. I created these as individual workbooks and then imported them into the overall course workbook. So I opened it, and I'll just give you a little bit of a walkthrough to give you a feel of what I did. I started with a basic course overview, introducing the purpose of the course, as well as myself and the TAs. They did have a photo here, but I took it out after the course was done, so they didn't have to choose to share it. Within each week, I won't go to that one, let me go here. I had this same structure throughout. So it would start with a weekly overview where I would embed a video, a couple-minute video, telling them about what the goals of the week were and what the learning outcomes were. As all students seem to love, I had a to-do list or a checklist for each week that they could go through to make sure that they were meeting all the requirements. And then I'd have 3 different content pages, 2 to 3, depending on the week. A link to the class meet, which just to make it convenient for them, that was essentially the same up top, but then the questions or cases that we discussed down below so they could prepare, and then a place to put their reflection paper. I'll just give you a couple examples of pages to show how I use them. Let's see. So each week was obviously a little bit different, but I'd always have the same heading just to identify it. Then I'd have an integration of text, of images, as well as videos in some weeks. But I'll often have these reflection questions stimulated or integrated throughout, always at the end of the section, but often within it as well. And that's, tackled some of the questions that we might have discussed in person. And these weren't marked, but it was meant to just stimulate them to reflect and think critically about the issues as they went through the content. And then again, a summary and a reflection at the end. Typically it was open-ended, but sometimes I used, a bit more of a structured approach. So I'll just show this week was about program evaluation. And in this context, I gave them, some tables, and there's different tables for each content so that they could map actually some questions from their group project to, what they had just learned about the content. So they could map through and build, within their group project within the page. And then I guess I'll just show at the end. So this major assignments, you can create this so that they can, of course, upload all their own materials. So I created a few where they could open and upload, their pitch and then their group projects so that they could keep that in one place. One of the things I liked as well here was the ability for them to take the reflections with them. I find in this course often their ideas about older adults and how to accommodate them and their reflection on the variety of abilities changes quite considerably over the term. So it's interesting for them to be able to walk away with the reflections in one place to show the evolution of their thinking. So I'll just switch back here to the PowerPoint. There we go.
And you're there. Yep.
Good. So what were my lessons learned? I think the fall was difficult for many of the reasons, and probably for everyone. For uploading content, I think the biggest challenge for me was changing the format of the content from presentations and discussions to something that would work in an online delivery, but changing it to PebblePad itself wasn't any more difficult than changing it to Learn. I would say that once you have a template, if you are able to leverage the help of OLAs, that made it quicker. It meant I could, I had a basic template, they loaded it in, and then I reviewed it and edited it rather than spending that extra time. I would say one of the biggest challenges from a student perspective was figuring out how to submit their reflections. And I had detailed notes, step-by-step notes that were there every week. I ended up after the first week highlighting it in yellow, the instructions, so they would hopefully gear in. And still there was some people who didn't figure it out until several weeks into the term. So in hindsight, I would do a screencast showing click by click how to submit in PebblePad, just because the wording isn't that intuitive. It says, I want to, and then you have to say share and where to share to, rather than just saying submit. I would also, so they didn't share their content reflections with each other, but that's one of the benefits, of course, in discussions in class. So I would want to think a little bit more about how to share content reflections with others. And I think that the other speakers today will talk a bit more about that, as well as providing insights back. We didn't mark them all, which would have been quite a heavy load on myself and the TAs, but even providing some of our own insights might have been helpful to them. I will say in terms of challenges with tech, I found there was actually more challenges with Bongo than with PebblePad, at least with the OLAs, and Catherine certainly to help in setting up the pages and assignments in Catherine's case especially.
Did they see the answers?
They all see the questions and we can share feedback on those. The reflections, they don't see each other's. They didn't see each other's. They do get feedback from us on the reflections. I think Jen and Debbie can talk more about how they shared information across students, which it can be a little bit more challenging, but they figured out some solutions, which I would like to employ if I were to do it again, because that's certainly one of the benefits.
Yeah, thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Jen Coggin. I teach in the nanotechnology engineering program. So I'm going to talk about the use of PebblePad in a third year course that I teach. It was in the fall 2020. And this is a course called Introduction to Nanosystems Design. And it's the first of a 3-course sequence. So they take this one in third year and then 2 subsequent courses in fourth year. And these round out their engineering capstone design project. For those of you not sure of these, every engineering student does a capstone project. So it's just their fourth year design project is what they're called. And usually it's they form groups, come up with their own ideas of a design project that they want to work on. They prototype and test, and then they have a symposium at the end, which is happening this week actually. So in my class, fall 2020, I had 91 students in my course, which is pretty typical. The course starts out where they're obviously individual students and they do form teams. So we try to direct them to form teams of 4, and this occurs sort of a month, 5 weeks into the course. This is a little bit of a different course because it is credit, no credit. There aren't any grades associated. And really, I think of it as myself as the instructor as more of a support person for them. So helping them through this navigating of how to come up with an idea for their project, the things that they need to know in order to be successful in their design project at the end. So I do provide a lot of feedback throughout the course. And at the end of this third year course, their main goal is really to produce a project proposal, which they then take on to their fourth year. So why did I use PebblePad for this course? Really, I wanted a way of increasing student engagement with the content. And I was already going to use PebblePad, but with the fact that we were online, this was really even more important. So those sort of questions that I would have asked in my normal lectures, I was able to add those questions into PebblePad. And I also do quite a bit of workshops. So where they work in their groups, I might give them worksheets to do. I do a lot of walking around the classroom and helping them connect with content, answer their questions, that type of thing. And as already mentioned by Laura, there's reflection is also quite easy to add into PebblePad, and I think that's really important for this course. All right, so this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'll walk you through it. This is really the pathway through my course. So as I mentioned, it goes from at the beginning individual work, and then about halfway through they've created their teams, so it moves into being more of a teamwork type of thing. I had 6 PebblePad assignments throughout the term, and so I began with an introduction, and down below here are just the sort of pieces that I had within each of my PebblePad worksheets and the output of what I took from this. So I'll get into talking about reports a little bit later on. So after an introduction, we took a look at some of the soft skills that I think are important for a design group. So some team dynamics, effective communication. So a lot of sort of individual reflection I thought was really important here. And then we move into more of the technical side of things. So talking and walking through engineering design, they start to look at their personal strengths and weaknesses in terms of teamwork, but also the technical side. So maybe what work they've done on co-op, what areas interest them for a project that they might work on. Then, as I mentioned, we move on to teamwork. So they have now formed their teams, and a lot of the rest of this is brainstorming. So how do they come up with their project idea? And then they're narrowing it down into, at the end, actually defining the problem that they're going to be working on and what that project is going to look like. So along the way, again, feedback. So I'm pulling reports and then also able to take the information that they are filling out and adding on PebblePad. And I could take a look at that before I actually met with them, which I found really, really useful. It helped me provide more support for the students. One thing Catherine wanted me to touch on was this idea of reports. So this is a way within PebblePad, and I will show you when I switch to that, is to pull out information or data out of PebblePad. So I used it to actually extract student responses. So you can create a report, and that very first assignment I had them do, I asked questions surrounding their expectations, their worries, concerns, what they thought might be a challenge of doing a design project. And I wanted to do this so that I could understand sort of their where they're coming from, their worries, so that I could change my course content up in order to support them, talk more about the things they were worried about, and those types of things. So PebblePad was really, really easy and useful for this. So I'll show you, but you can pull a report, it downloads everything into an Excel file, except it's pretty messy. So luckily I had a SOLA who helped me out, and they were able to collate all the responses. They did a great job of taking those responses, looking at themes, and then actually doing a count of how many times each sort of theme or response was given. So this really helped me guide the direction of the course and support the students. So I'm just gonna switch now to show my PebblePad. So I used it a little bit differently than what Laura had done, where she had her whole course in here. I used it more just as an assignment space. So as I mentioned, there were 6 assignments. Started with an introduction. You can embed a checklist that the students really appreciated. But here's that list of questions about, of course, the project expectations. What were they excited about? I wanted to know what they thought they'd be engaging in, what activities they'd be doing, and sort of challenges, those types of things. And this is that report that I pulled out all of the answers to these questions, and we're able to aggregate their responses so I could sort of help them in their projects. This is actually an example of one of the students' responses. And so one thing I was really impressed with was how they connected with the content and really put a lot of thought and answered the questions really quite well. Another example is in assignment 4. So this is where they're now working in their teams, and I've begun making them do some brainstorming activities. So I really enjoyed PebblePad because you can very easy to make it look really professional. You can add in figures. This one was all about trying to take each of their strengths and combine them into the group. So there's 4 students there, and trying to find what is that project space they want to be working in. And so I gave a couple of examples of what a mind map would look like, and then they were able to work on that. I gave a template on Learn that they could use, or they could come up with their very own. take an image, upload it here, and again, a few sort of reflection questions at the end of each assignment. So if anyone has any other questions about the other assignments, I'm happy to answer them. But I'm going to just quickly switch and show you that report function in PebblePad. So this is what actually a submission.
Jen, can you make it a little bit bigger? I'm not sure if we're
bigger?
able to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's as big as I can go.
Thank you.
All right.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a submission page. So this is a submission from each student. So there would be the 91, and that's what that looks like there. If you clicked on it, it would go to that workbook where you can see their answers. But for pulling a report, there's actually quite a bit of function within here. And if you did have any other questions, I'm sure Catherine would be happy to answer them.
Actually, Jen, can
yes.
you just point out there, one of the features that you can do is anonymize your students' work. And so that's what you've done here.
Yes,
right?
That's correct.
You could actually have the person's name where it says publisher, but Jen has used the function where you can anonymize it.
Yes, yeah. So normally the student's name would be that publisher piece, but I didn't want to show the students' names. So yeah, there's a way of anonymizing that information. All right, so I use this workbook CSV functions. So it really was just, you can click on this. You can decide what you want it to download. And then once you've done that, it downloads it and sends it to you through email. So you actually get it that way as an Excel file. All right, I'm just going to go back to my presentation. All right, so I actually pulled some of the feedback that I received, in particular about using PebblePad from my course feedback. So the first one was, these are actual student comments. So the use of multiple platforms was confusing. So I did end up using Learn how I normally would have for my course, PebblePad for assignments. They do a video presentation as well. So I use Bongo, I use WebEx for the meetings, and I completely understand that was quite confusing. So I would actually maybe sort of go the route of how Laura did and combine the whole course within PebblePad as much as possible. As mentioned before, it was really difficult to figure out the submission process for the first time. So making that very clear and probably saying that over and over again was really important. One student said they love the organization. And I think that probably stems from, it's very easy on PebblePad to set up the work from my end of making it very clear, very straightforward. It's obvious where they're filling in, answering questions or connecting with the work. So I think that was from that comment. The small, consistent small assignments each week that help me stay on top of watching lectures. So I thought that was great. This is exactly what I wanted PebblePad to do. So they were able to engage with the content really well. One bit negative one was Pebble assignments were redundant once groups were formed. Considering having one Pebble submission per group instead of having everyone rewrite the work out 4 times. And so what was difficult was, because my course is sort of half individual, half group work, there wasn't an easy way, and I don't know if it's even possible, to sort of switch where they're only submitting 1 per group. So I worked around that by just having every student submit. And of course, the work would be exactly the same for each of the students within 1 group. So that was a bit challenging, but I know the next presenters are going to talk a bit about how they overcame that. All right, I'm just going to finish off with the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. So really great things. I will definitely be using PebblePad going forward. It was really easy to set up the worksheets. Like, I just had to think about, all right, what would I normally be doing in class? I'm going to add this in, drag and drop segments. It's already created for you. You just have choices of what you want that workspace to look like. You're able to add in other media types really easily, so figures and videos. the use of reports, and I'm learning more and more as I talk to Catherine about the function of that. And I was really happy with the level of detail that the students included in the assignments. I think just by having it all there, very easy to see it all laid out, that they didn't have to worry about, figuring things out. They could just add in their comments and results. All right, the badge. So I wasn't marking per se, but I was going through and making sure that they were filling everything out and doing it to a satisfactory level. So I did go through and mark completed or add some feedback, and that was a lot of clicking. Apparently it's been improved, but I don't have a TA for this course, so it really was a lot of work for me to do that. And again, as I've already mentioned, there wasn't an easy way to use Teams. And then the really ugly part was it was just really confusing. It's sort of learning a new language using PebblePad. There's two different platforms between Pebble Plus, what the students use and where you set up the workbooks, versus Atlas, which is more of the grading part of it, and a lot of terminology. So that was just a bit confusing. But luckily we have the team here at CTE. Catherine and the whole team really supported me. So they would sit and we'd figure it out. And once that was all set up, it was easy to create my content. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Catherine. Hello, everybody. I'm Xiao Dai.
And hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Wang.
So today we are going to sort of share with you our experience of using PebblePad for the course SDS 150R. It's called Lifespan Processes. So before we start, I will give you a little bit of a background information about the course and how we got started. So SDS 150R is a required first-year course for all SDS students. So because we are quite a big major, so every year we have multiple on-campus sections that we offered. When it's offered on campus, we have about 50 students per section. And we also have online version of this course that we offer at least once or twice a year, and about 60 students in each section. And the course is basically about human development, and it's an introduction course for first-year students.
So Xiao and myself, we teamed up and was assigned to redevelop this course in an online version that was scheduled to run. Actually, it's this spring 2021. I have been teaching this course on campus for a number of years. And so when Xiao was going to teach this course on campus and knowing that we're going to make it an online course, so she attended the training of PebblePad in fall 2019 with the vision that using this platform for this course. So winter 2020, when Xiao was teaching this course on campus for 2 sections with a total of 120 students using PebblePad, I got very excited. So I became her teaching assistant, just wanting to, it's really learning by doing. So I was able to see how this has all come about, got me really excited. And at the same time, during that term, I was teaching another course with that group presentation component. When I saw how Xiao could use PebblePad and turning this group presentation and the peer review, right away, I said, I need that one for my other class. So with Victoria's support, instantly during the term, quickly, I turned that assignment into a PebblePad assignment. And it's just such a wonderful transition.
So one of the reasons I actually thought PebblePad can help for our online course, and I used it on campus as well, is because it was sort of described as a very good platform for student journaling their learning. And the course SDS 150R, Debbie and I envision it's going to be a very student-centered type of course. And we want to encourage students to do journaling throughout the course, so to encourage meaningful learning. And of course, we like students to have the opportunity to apply what they learn and put it together and do a presentation. And we also like to use the platform to encourage sort of peer review and create a learning community. So we thought PebblePad could be very useful for this model of collaborative learning for students.
So basically, the three components that we really effectively used the PebblePad was the weekly journal reflection, helping students to engage with the content, and then the group portfolio and presentation, really to showcase their work in such a creative, interactive way. And then the peer assessment and the feedback with qualitative and quantitative feedback to their fellow students for their group presentation, really enhance the students' evaluation skills and generated such a great report for the presenters. And we just feel it's a great way to do that.
So we are going to focus sharing information with you about how we use PebblePad for group presentation and portfolio, and how we use it for peer assessment. First of all, there's a lot of behind the scenes setup before the class started. Once the class started, everything was set up. Students actually make their presentation in class and also present their group portfolio on PebblePad online for the classmates to access. But of course, if you remember last year, springtime, we suddenly moved into a virtual learning situation because of the pandemic. But so the last 2 or 3 weeks, some of the group presentation moved completely online. And then we get this peer assessment, includes both rating scale type of quantitative information and also qualitative feedback. And we also generate report and give it to the groups to see what kind of feedback they got from their peers. So about behind the scenes setup, and I think the other two presenters talk about it as well. And when I started, I thought it's very important that all the link to different sort of materials has to be very easy for students to access, and there needs to be very clear directions on learn for students to follow. And so what we did is first week, we actually invited Victoria to our on-campus class and did quite a bit of explanation and instruction to students, and also show them how to find all the information on Learn as well. And before the class start, of course, we need to do a lot of setup for PebblePad and also the link to Alice. So that part, I feel that we were very well supported by the staff from CEL, and I was very grateful for that. Now for the group assignment and links to the student presentation, Victoria actually came to our class and set up this Google Doc document. We put a table together, and right there in class, students form their group and we share this document with the whole class, and they put in their group name, and they right away create a link to their portfolio, so the whole class can access their portfolio. And this was done the first day in the class, and right away put on the Learn for everybody to access. And I would like to sort of share with you some of the example portfolio that students created for this class. So actually, I should show. So this is one of the portfolio. I was very impressed by how fast students pick up the skill and actually can create beautiful content on PebblePad for everybody to see. And this is one group that did on the topic about emotional and social development for early adulthood. And you can see the students already use this tab to separate their topic, and they talk about mate selection, intimate relationship, breakup, and they give references as well. And like I said, you can see that they create beautiful content and insert videotape for students to see. So this is one example. And as I mentioned, students actually make the presentation using PebblePad in class already. And then, of course, they share their link. And so students actually could go in and see their PebblePad information like this. And this was a very well done group presentation. So I thought it's interesting to show you what students have done. Now, once the class moved to the online after pandemic, we have students right away move to complete an online type of situation. And so this is one of the last presentation, and it's about death and dying and bereavement. And you can see that students actually create their lecture or their presentation and put a video audio clip here for to share with their classmates. I also like to share with you after group presentation, the whole class would go through this peer assessment form to give feedback. And I want to show you what we did for our on-campus version of our assessment form. And Debbie and I actually are working with the CL Center for Extend CEL to develop online version. So now we have another online version of the assessment form that might be interesting for you to take a look as well. So this is our assessment form that we use. It's a worksheet, and students actually go to the worksheet and give feedback, and on a rating scale for example, this question is about the organization, and it's a 6-point rating scale, and we can get sort of very quick quantitative feedback like this. We also give a text box like this, asking students to talk about what they like about the portfolio presentation, and give a suggestion. Sorry. Now with the help of Daniel from Center for Extended Learning, this is the online form that peer evaluation form that we are going to use for our online course. And you can see that this is a rubric that Daniel helped us to put together, and students actually could do all the assessment on this rubric, and then give comments here as well. And so I want to just share with you a little bit about how we summarize the feedback and give it to return to students for each group to take a look. So you can recall that we got some rating scale, and then we got some qualitative feedback as well. And the other two presenters already talked about how you can generate a report from Alice. So we actually could generate that the Alice platform. We can get an Excel file like this, and you can see that basically all the data got dumped here, and we have 6 questions, And each individual, the students' feedback is here, and their qualitative feedback's there. And what I did for the class is I could actually use an Excel file and get an average for each point that got assessed. And sorry. And I actually use this as students' grades as well. I can get an average for these questions and overall rating here as well. And I can quickly generate very good sort of assessment information. For the qualitative feedback, so the number part, I only use it for myself. And to give each group feedback, I actually generated a report like this. From Alice as well. And you can see this report. You can get a sort of summative result for each question with a frequency table, and students can see how many students, how many peers give them 4 or 5 or 6. The nice part is that I actually, within the Alice report, you can show response. You show each individual response, and I could sort of hide that. I can hide the responses so students won't see which peer give them 4, which person give them 5, or which person give them 6. So that part is anonymous individual feedback, but they get a summary here. But for the qualitative data, we actually, show individual response, and we let students know in advance that their names will be visible for their comment. And you can see that students will see what each peer give them in terms of their feedback. And of course, there's one good point they would point out, and they also give some constructive feedback in terms of the area for improvement.
We considered it's a very essential skills for students to learn how to give effective feedback and comments, because SD as a student, social development studies, many students using that as a launching pad, getting into social work or teaching or law. So these is essential skills they are able to practice, and with that accountability.
Okay. So that's all we would like to share today.
I'm going to add my experience about marking the weekly journal. I found, Xiao and I, we were so amazed how students so quickly they utilize the platform. And for me, that time marking that assignment actually was very simple and easy. And Victoria at that time helped me. Not only I could just make a comment right there, I could even save my comments. And then for next one, similar comments, I could easily just click on that. And the marks, students, once I publish, they get it. And the marks were linked directly to Learn. So I find marking that assignments actually is quite easy, even though that time we were dealing with 120 students for the 2 sections.